Constitution outlined how accounting practices
fuck?
did not.
What kind of likeness is that?
If they were great artists, they'll be in a museum.
Evidence today may signal at least one.
I'm fucking fodder for cartoonists now.
And welcome back to Gutter Boys, episode 101. Whoever would have thought that we would have made it past this? And after the love fest of episode 100, we are back to the same old shit of...
We're in full Dalmatian cosplay now. We are furries, and 101 Dalmatians themed episode for this one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the furry community is where the money is. They
true.
Always want commissions. Mm-hmm. This new Zelda game has them going fucking crazy with some of the designs in it. It's pretty insane. So,
sorry, your dog.
No, that's actually my furry persona.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually Alicia.
Yeah.
in full fursuit.
Alrighty, well, today on the feed, we have special guest Zak Sally, who kind of came out of nowhere because, I was definitely aware of his work, but we were talking about, guests we were going to have on the show, and he was not on the upcoming list. However, he does have a brand new book out, Sammy the Mouse, Book 3, via his own publishing imprint, Mano, as well as Killgore. And we get into it with Zak about kind of everything and his hiatus away from comics and what it was like to do comics, stop comics, and then get back into it and everything in between. So it's
Alicia, shut up.
Yeah.
Alicia, shut the fuck up.
And play the rock
Sorry.
video.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no. So pretty lengthy interview. So we're going to keep it short here. I'll let you talk since this dog keeps fucking barking.
Yeah, pretty good interview. It's just 2 hours of us talking about Low. So
yeah,
that's what you're into. Have fun on this one then. No, we actually don't really talk about music, which I was kind of surprised by. I thought we would eventually touch on.
Yeah, I wanted to get into it, but we were running pretty long just off the comics. So I was like, you know what? We're gonna have to come back another day for this. Here at Gutter Boys, it's minimal effort, maximum profits.
That's right. We'll have him back on a bonus episode. We'll get into the Mormon lore of Low.
Yes.
How about that?
Yeah, so speaking of maximum profits, patreon.com/gutterboys. JB just did an interview with Alex Knoll about all things CZF from the organizer's side. Pretty good interview. Definitely check that out. Plenty of content in the archives. That's patreon.com/gutterboys or gutterboys.top for $5 a month. You can binge everything in the Gutter Boys Patreon vault. What a deal. But no, continue to support us so we can make it to episode 200. We've got about enough money to make it to episode 108. About now, so
yeah, I don't care either way.
yeah. This attitude is brought to you by these wonderful sponsors, so stick around, and after the break, we'll be back with Zak Sally.
So stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Meow. Sid the Cat magazine is out now. If you've ever been to an amazing rock and roll show and thought, I wish I could experience this moment again, but in comic form, then Sid the Cat magazine is for you. Fiercely independent show promoters Sid the Cat have joined forces with comics journalist Andrew Greenstone to bring you an ongoing publication that documents the SoCal indie rock scene. This stunning 52-page full-color magazine features comics, articles, photos, and illustrations from a rotating cast of local illustrators and writers. It's a celebration of Sid's artists and venues and supports those keeping the bleeding edge of the indie music scene alive. Our first issue covers musical artists Big Thief, Illuminati Hotties, Mike Kroll, Fucked Up, Finn Lilly, Katie Kirby, Kate LeBon, Cursive, Christian Lee Hudson, No Win, and so many more. If you are a fan of comics, indie music, zines, rock reports, or community by the way of culture, order a copy now at sidthecat.com/sid-zine. Again, that's sidthecat.com/sid-zine.
And now a few words from our sponsors, the Santos Sisters.
más que enseguida las hermanas santos aparecerán para salvar el día.
Ey, son varias lanas, son dos hermanas, tan calientes que te matan con su encanto. Y los villanos, hagan lo que hagan, no son rivales para la hermana santo. El mal con su magia, ellas te tendrán. No importa el problema, en cualquier situación con ellas contarás.
El crimen no tendrá donde esconderse, a plena vista solo son chicas normales. Pero cuando los problemas aparecen, son superheroínas muy sensuales. Santos, las hermanas santos, como ellas no hay tantos dispuestos a luchar. Santos, las hermanas santos, como ellas no hay tantos dispuestos a luchar.
Purchase your tracks today.
Rust Belt Review is a quarterly comics lit magazine featuring serialized and short-form comics from some of the most exciting cartoonists in the small press scene today. Volume 1 features work from Gutter alums M.S. Harkness, Audra Stang, and Caleb Orecchio, along with work by Andrew Greenstone, Sean Knickerbocker, and Juan Jose Fernandez. You can order your copy of Rust Belt Review today by going to rustbeltreview.org. Enter in promo code GUTTER to receive $2 off your order. Again, that website is rustbeltreview.org. Promo code GUTTER.
Athenium Comic Art is an original art website for some of the best cartoonists in the business. They currently represent Remy Boydell, Marie Capelle-France, Nicole Gu, Jonathan Hill, Emma Hunsinger, Casey Nowak, Micah Song, and Tilly Walden. Athenium Comic Art gives fans the opportunity to own an original piece of art from their favorite comics and support the artists that they love. In their short time in business, they've already shipped many iconic pages out to hardcore fans across the globe. Don't miss out on your chance to own a one-of-a-kind piece of history. Check out their website, atheniumcomicart.com, and type in Gutter Gang at checkout to receive free shipping on your first order. Again, the website is atheniumcomicart.com, and the code is Gutter Gang.
Morning, Gary. Morning, Marianne. Need a menu? Nah, I'll just have the usual. You sure do love your eggs and coffee, Gary. Best way to start your morning, Marianne. Well, that and an issue of Town and County. What's that? Town and County is a new comic series written and drawn by cartoonist Alex Nall. He's that guy that wrote them books about teaching and that Mr. Rogers feller. Oh, he was such a nice man. The first issue is 36 pages of black and white comic stories with beautiful color covers and features 6 stories about folks in our little township here in Illinois, like Susie Barber, the house cleaner that uncovers her client's dirty laundry, if you know what I mean, and Stanley Pepper, that big feller that just lost his job and took to drinking every night at Bugs's Tavern. Well, ain't that something? Town and County is published by Ivy Terrace Press, headquartered in Chicago. Chicago? Who would want to live there? So dirty. Each issue comes with a copy of the Hometown Hero, our little town's newsletter, and it's only $8. $8? Where can I get it, Gary? You can order a copy of Town and County on the internet at StoreEnvy/Alex Nall Comics. Oh, there's your breakfast, Gary. Thanks, Marianne. Ah, nothing like a cup of coffee and a good comic book.
The Last Aviatrix is a post-nuclear adventure comic by independent, Los Angeles-based cartoonist Buster Cagle. The story follows Summer, our last aviatrix, who pilots the sole-surviving airplane, a nuclear-powered B-29. As she travels the ruined world finding ways to survive and help humanity, while dealing with the imminent threat of the Atom-born, a rare breed of atomic wizards that want to see her out of the sky, her mission becomes complicated when she accidentally picks up Henry, an Atom-born child who wields incredible power, and Clementine, a berserker on a quest for vengeance. Can our aviatrix survive this ruined and irradiated wasteland? Wasteland? Every issue can be read for free on bustercagle.com/comics. Paper copies can be ordered as well, but, you can still read it for free. If you like Wizards or Warplanes, go check it out.
Now, back to our program.
All right, and we're back from the break. And for this episode, we are joined with Minneapolis-based cartoonist and educator, Zak Sally. Zak, how are you doing today?
I'm all right. How are you guys doing?
Doing well, man. Can't complain. How about you, Cam?
Yeah, definitely here and excited to talk to you today.
Hell yeah.
Me too.
Got a nice fat stack of books.
Yeah, I was looking over all that today.
Yes.
Thank you. You're very generous with everything you sent us, Zak.
Cool.
Made sure to read the new issue from Killgore of Sammy the Mouse, Book 3, which is, I guess, why you're here. That's what you're here to promote. You've I would actually, up front, want to ask, Mano, is that your own printing imprint, or is that just something else that's based in Minneapolis?
No, that's my thing. I realize I want to make a shirt that says invisible for 30 years, but I've been doing Mano since 1993.
Okay.
And I mean, I started originally, I was just doing zines and whatnot. And then in 92 or 93, I was living out on the West Coast and decided that I wanted to make it into a quote unquote label, which meant virtually nothing. But, just that I'd start when I put out zines, I'd put it out on my own label called Mano.
Of course.
And then, so I did a bunch of that. And then 2005, I bought a printing press, and I kind of I left low, and I decided I was going to try and make a run at being a publisher, like less zines, more real books. So the first thing I put out was John Porcellino's Diary of a Mosquito Abatement Man. But yeah, I've been putting stuff out sporadically on Mano for 30 years. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I was thinking that's what I was familiar with the Porcellino title, and I was thinking that maybe you were running that, but I didn't want to misspeak there. So I mean, obviously that shows that you've had roots in small press since '93. Was Mano like the first stuff you ever released, or were you doing stuff before that?
No, I mean, I think the first zine I did, me and John P. and I think my generation of cartoonists were all the generation. I kind of hate terminology like this, but when the zine revolution happened. I feel like that came from, this time when actually copy machines became pretty accessible to people. Before that, there was no real easy or accessible way for you to print your own stuff. And a lot of people my age, it's kind of like, you were 12 or 13 and somebody worked in an office and you got to go copy stuff and make it on a copier. And that was pretty life-changing, but by the time I was 20, 21, it was Kinko's Copies was every place. And
right.
It was just that first flush of not the first flush, but the first different flush of the ease of self-publishing became easier than ever before. It was a really cool time.
There's a lot of zine trading and, distros, I guess, happening, especially with Spit and a Half, I guess, kind of starting around the same time. So were you engaging with the culture by, moving around? Were you playing in bands at the time and taking your zines on the road? How are you engaging with the culture back then versus now?
I mean, now, I should state off, at the front end. I kind of purposely sort of ducked my head out of comics for a few years. So I'm sort of, talking to you guys and a couple other people is me sort of, within the last year, I've sort of dipped my toe back in. I had to just stop for a while. But that couple of years was, I think, one of the only times in my entire life where I feel like I haven't been connected to that community, But in answer to your question, I think when I first started doing it, when I was in bands, and this is certainly true for John and a lot of folks, where the lines between being in a band and making music and having a zine and making comics and doing art, I think those lines were extremely blurry and they all kind of fit in this same large pot of just kind of underground DIY culture, you know? The same thing like Jaime has however many years on me, but he was doing punk flyers, you know, like because his brother was in Dr. No, you know what I mean? It was just real this.
Yeah. We always talk about like the Venn diagram and like music and comic, like there's always an intersect, you know, like with, you know, cartoonists and like music and like the scene, you know, of both scenes actually, you know, music and it's like very homogenous as far as like both of them and kind of fluid as far as going, you know, back and forth. You see a lot of artists doing that. Now, I do want to kind of talk about, you know, your break that you mentioned. Was this like self-imposed? Were you just burned out? Like, why did you take a step away for a few years?
You know, well, how, you know, I had a total meltdown, total of as complete meltdown as I've ever experienced in my life. And I think at that point, I was kind of like, I think maybe I need to stop being a cartoonist. And I think I actually need to stop being an artist for a while to just reevaluate my relationship to that whole thing. And that makes it all sound like, you know, like I was thoughtful and deliberate about it. But I was kind of like, I need to shut down for a while and reassess everything from the bottom up and see if I still want to do this, see if it's still you know, and
Sure.
I think for me, it was kind of like, I mean, I think it was before the camera. I mean, before we started taping, but I mean, I was teaching comics for 14 years and that was something I never thought I'd end up doing. But I mean, I've made my life as a working artist, you know, since I was 22 and that, I think there's some dangers that come along with that, you know, and, you know, when the thing that you do also becomes the thing that you need to do to bring in money or frankly, to fucking feel okay about yourself, you know, I think there's some concrete walls you can run into after doing that for a really long time. And I ran into them hard, you know, I mean, I think during COVID, everybody had some real long, hard looks in the mirror about just about everything. And the way things shook down for me, that was a part of it, you know? So you want to keep talking about that? It's super fun.
Yeah, well, you know, I do want to talk about, you know,
yeah.
But it is a very valid thing. And I would say that when you take a break from creating or, you know, whether it be burnout or, you know, just because you hit a wall, whatever the cause may be, or, you know, voluntarily, you know, you can always kind of come back with a new perspective. Do you feel like, you know, now that you're creating again, you do have a new perspective on things at all? Or do you feel like it's kind of just back on the saddle?
No, I mean, I think and I hope when I explain that it wasn't a sort of, I mean, it was awful and brutal and terrible on all kinds of levels, but I think it was really helpful and really necessary. And it was something that, you know, there's these forces of inertia, you know, where you just you're like, I am this thing and I do this thing and this is what I am and this is what I do. And you get to a certain point and you're like, that can't be the sum totality of how you view yourself, you know, or like, I have this compulsion to do this thing. And at a certain point, you're like, well, that's a compulsion, you know, like why are you actually doing this? And it wasn't making me, I just kept doing it. And then I was like, this isn't making me happier. It's not making me a better person. What the fuck's, and I don't know why I'm doing this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah.
And I'm, you know, I think I said this in another podcast I did, but it's, you know, the way the fucking world is going right now, it's...
Yeah, you don't have to tell me, brother.
No, yeah, I mean, just doing your little comic books, it's like, it's beautiful and it's wonderful, but it's just, you know, right now the stakes are higher seemingly for everything. And, and I don't have any solid answers for that, but I do know that I had to find different and better reasons to want to make comics again.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like such a relatable feeling to have, you know, about your work. And since we're all creatures of habit, you know, eventually we start questioning why we do the things that we do, especially when they stop bringing us the joy and the satisfaction, which led us to the thing in the first place. Yeah.
And since we all do this thing, it's like, it's not and never has been money, you know?
Right. Yeah.
You know, in one way, it's, if you are making a living at this, I mean, I know I am friends with a couple cartoonists who do make a living at this, and they work like maniacs, they just, they just,
it's thankless.
And actually I was hanging out with Noah Van Skyver at TCAF, and it was really nice because we hadn't had a chance to catch up for a while, but it was just, I mean, that guy, he works like an animal, and he always has. He's just a totally dedicated comics machine. And, I mean, I think that's, if you are going to have this be, or you want this to be like, this is the way I make a living, along with, this is my very personal art. I mean, I think there's very few ways to do that aren't 110%, and no, I mean, just as we're talking right now, it's like, I love comics, but I'm not 110% comics,
For sure. Do you feel like there's ever been like a period where you were like 110% comics? And do you feel like, what are the advantages and disadvantages to that?
Wow, you guys are asking me questions that are making me think about stuff that I hadn't thought about before. I think
the thinking man's pod.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, I always, again, with the sort of reassessment of your relationship to the whole thing. I mean, I think a lot of my life, I sort of beat myself up for not being 110% or not being able to go 110% on comics, because it felt like, because again, that's the reality. It's like, if you want to do this, that's what you have to do. And, even saying it out loud right now, it's like, I was super mad at myself the whole time I was in low for not being 110% on comics, which is fucking crazy. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, I'm on tour, like we toured like maniacs. We worked, I mean, like my 12 years in low, we were incredibly busy. Yeah. All the, the amount of music we kicked out, the amount of touring we did, it's like, that was life consuming, and I just look back and it's like the whole time it was that low was that life consuming. The whole time I was sort of beating myself up for not working on comics more.
Was comics your escape from making music? Like, not necessarily an escape, but like your additional outlet? Like, is that how you treated it?
Maybe.
Or did you try to put them first?
No, I mean, I think I've always had like a love-hate relationship with comics, because I do love them. And as you guys know, this is not woe is me, but it's like, it's really, it's a shit ton of work.
It sucks.
It's a totally insane amount of work that I don't think folks who, and I used to speak to this a bunch when I was teaching, like, I feel like your job, if you're a really good cartoonist, if you're a really fucking good cartoonist, you're invisible. You know what I mean? Like, you are working your tail off making comics so that people can have this seamless reading where you don't necessarily show up at all, where they never kind of realize that they're reading a comic, Do you guys know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Like if somebody's reading a comic and the whole time they're reading it, they're like, wow, look at that drawing. Like, this person must have really worked their, like if they're reading a comic and at the same time they're like, this person must have really worked their ass off, then it's like, then you didn't do a very good job, because they're supposed to be reading the comic. And not, you're supposed to be invisible in the sense of like, you're, I've just always felt like you work that hard to sort of try to be invisible in the process, but you work your tail off to do that for something that somebody probably is going to read in 10 minutes,
right.
Oftentimes.
If that.
Yeah. I mean, this new issue of Sammy, I said to you guys, I don't know, it's probably a 10, 15 minute read. And it's been 10 years since the last issue. It's been 10 years, and it feels really good to get it out. But also it's like, holy, 10 years is a long time.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I mean, that's something I feel like cartoonists and comic people, we talk amongst ourselves about pretty often. Like, that's a reoccurring topic of like the amount of time you pour into something like a comic, page by page, from beginning to end, to how the reader experiences that thing, it is not a 1-to-1, right? Like there's
right. No,
especially with like the growing like gimme
right
culture,
content,
like instant satisfaction. It's
I want
only
it
worse.
now. I want it now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an inherently absurd thing to do with your time that nobody would put that kind of time in unless they love it, or
it's truly a labor of love. Like there's way less benefits than actual, like, well, in my experience, and I feel like especially in small press, I feel like you really have to be in it for the love of the game.
Right.
Yeah, and and I think I was for a long time, and also just for basically my entire life, I've been the comics community and the music community. It's been something I've been part of, and it always shifts and changes more than you realize in the moment. But it's a great community, comics is a cool bunch of people,
Well, and I feel like it's like an everlasting tide that kind of rises and also falls. Now that said, though, I do want to kind of get into like your side of it as an educator as well.
Sure.
So I mean, like, what do you think, like, as far as like, if you, sorry, my dogs are going crazy, 1 second.
Sorry.
But yeah, if for some reason you were to
They're just telling me to shut up. Shut up, Cam.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up, Cam.
I'm going to be so mad if you don't leave those dogs in. I'm just saying that right now.
Well, I do know that, you're currently not teaching right now, but when you did, if there was something at the beginning of each semester that you set out, because each student's going to have a different path, work in different styles, and then honestly come from different backgrounds with comics. You're probably going to have your independent people, you're going to have your mainstream people, and so forth. So if there was like, is there one thing that you set out to accomplish each semester, like as like a general blanket that you hoped your students took away from, learning from you?
That's a good question. I think that changed a bunch over the years, and it might have changed more than I wanted it to. So I didn't go to college at all, and I didn't go to college for comics. I joined Low when I was 22, 23, something like that, and I left when I was 35.
That's like medical school, man. Like that's crazy.
Oh yeah. It was. I mean, it was really intense, and it was really.
I'm sure it was a blast, but like, damn.
Yeah, it was. It was real intense, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But when I got, that's sort of how I got into teaching is when I left Low in 2005. I was like 35, and I was like, what am I gonna do now? I didn't go to college. Yeah, it was tricky. But I got this cold call from the Minneapolis College of Art and Design saying, we need someone to try teaching. Do you want to do that? And I really didn't have any interest. I had never thought like, I'd like to try teaching comics. The idea of standing up in front of a group of people and talking about comics, it sounded awful to me. But I really needed the money, and I was like, yeah, I'll give this a shot. And I was really, really so. The first, sorry, you guys ready for this? It's going to be a great story.
Lay it on me.
So I go in there, and like, I've never gone to college. I have never even been to like a college class. Right. So they asked me to do this thing, and I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll do that. I know I know my comics, man. I know them back and forth. I can do this. And I was like, I'll kind of go in and do this, or I'll talk about this. And it was like a 2.5-hour class. And I walked in, and I wasn't cocky. I just didn't know what the hell I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
But I'd show up at this class, and there's 7 students, and it's a 2.5-hour class. And after, like, I kind of say what I've prepped to say, and that's about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And then
you just look up at the
clock.
I'm just
I kind of look at these 7 students, and they look back at me, and they're kind of like, and I'm sweating, and they, they're all looking at me like, you got nothing, don't you? And I'm like, oh, fuck.
They see right through you.
Oh, it was absolutely awful.
Sounds like a very humbling experience.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And like about 2 or 3, but then I just started freaking out. Like, how do I make this work? And calling everybody I know and talking to people who had, I just didn't have any, and I wasn't, I wasn't given a lot of instructions about how to make it work either. I was just a little thrown into it. But they wrote like a letter after a couple weeks, like to the chair saying this dude doesn't know what he's doing, and
fuck.
yeah. And but then I got a sense of what I was supposed to do and how to do it. And by the end of that semester, they were kind of like, yeah, that was good. You really didn't know what you were doing, but you got it together, and that was a good class. Thank you. And I was like, great. But yeah, I mean, the first 2-3 years of it were total white knuckle trying to figure it out. But I ended up really liking it. And I thought actually one of the most valuable things that I could bring to them or express to them was the fact that I didn't go to school for this, and that I wasn't going to blow smoke up their ass about what it was or wasn't, about what, like, comics are valuable as a skill for these reasons. And these are, skills that are applicable. This is the language of comics, and there's a lot of important things you have to know to pull off an even semi-decent comic, and here's what they are. And at the beginning too, I had to put aside, I mean, if you're going to be a good teacher, you sort of have to take your taste out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's there and they're in a comics class and they want to do something that you're totally uninterested in terms of genre or style or whatever, you are a shitty teacher if you're like, well, why don't you make that into an autobio comic? You know what I mean? Like, that's not.
Yeah. No, I agree.
That's just you sort of inflicting your will upon someone, So I think you kind of realize that your job is, okay, whatever this person is trying to do, it's your job to help them do the best version of that they possibly can, and also to sort of guide them, and expose them to as many things as you possibly can, so that they don't have that tunnel vision about what it is they want to do. You can, if you just expose them to a bunch of different stuff, I can't say the amount of times when I just bring in 40 pounds of books and just throw them out there, and a bunch of the students would be like, well, whatever. But a bunch of the students would be like, what is this? I've never seen anything. What is this? And you can sort of watch their entire perspective on this change. And that's an insanely rewarding feeling, like
absolutely.
As an instructor, not like, oh, now they're going to do the kind of comics that I like or that I want, but just, those are the moments in my life that I've treasured where it's somebody, whether it's music or comics or art or something, when somebody puts something in front of me and I'm like, I have to reconfigure the way I look at everything because of what I'm seeing right here. That shit's the best.
Yeah. And it's really refreshing to hear that from you, because there are a number of educators who are currently teaching right now, like the next generation of potential comic creators who did not get that. You know what I mean? Like they got the educator who only has this perspective, this aesthetic, and they are not willing to go outside their comfort zone beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did not. I'm happy to be out of academia.
Okay.
I did.
I was going to ask, do you think you'd ever go back, or are you just out?
No, I'm out. And it's tough for me to talk about, because I do not want to lapse into sour grapes or bitching or anything like that.
Okay.
Hey, this is a safe space for sour grapes.
Yeah, and I also don't want to. I don't want to shit all over. I had like a lot of amazing students. And I do feel I am really proud of the teacher I ended up being. Largely, I think I was able to like help a lot of people figure out what they wanted to do. And maybe I just feel like I was able to be helpful to a lot of people over those years. But I also think that like a lot of the other structures that are all crumbling, I mean, higher education it's real fucked up. It's real fucked up. I mean, in your head when you're doing that, again, as somebody who was self-taught, at MCAT is like $36,000 a year. And I can't imagine being a working artist with that kind of debt.
Yeah. And I mean, unfortunately, because, I feel like this is just kind of off on a tangent, but I feel like because you're pushed to go to school so young, a lot of young artists end up with the debt, if not more, just from trying to go to do a master's and whatnot. So it definitely is a massive problem in my eyes, especially when it's so hard, in these times to make a living off of art, to even pay that shit back.
Yeah, I can't imagine, like that. I feel like that's the only reason I was able to, be a working artist all these years is because if I was paying off that debt, I would have been totally hosed. And, you kind of have to separate that from like, I am trying to give folks stuff that I think is valuable, that has value. Like, I can't think about how much you're paying for this because for some of you, your parents are paying for all of it. For some of you, you're working a bunch of jobs. Like, I just don't know. I just have to try and make sure that I have to try and make sure that I'm giving you everything I got in terms of that. And part of that is me being like, you are a great cartoonist and you make weirdo comics and you're great at it. And we need to have a conversation about the fact that this is all, like you're never going to make a living at this. Not because you're not good, but because
it's just the reality of the situation.
It's just the reality,
Yeah.
And
yeah,
like
you could always hit the lottery, and get that 1 in a million chance but I mean, to be honest, I mean, we're all at the same shows in the same trenches, there's the age old joke that, the small press is just the same $20 bill passed around,
Yep.
So,
I mean, and even that,
not much has changed.
Yeah. And even that's got a bunch of worth to it, and like, we might be all trading around the same bill, but we're all happy to be giving each other that $20 bill,
Right.
Like, it's like,
yeah,
these are the people that get it, and that's not, I again, like culturally, what we're supposed to do is sort of value like, well, the more books you sell or the more money you make or whatever, that's kind of the sign of success or validity or whatever. But man, it's, you reach 1,000 people with your awesome fucked up little comic book. That's not a small thing. That's 1,000. That's 1,000 people.
Yeah,
you know what
definitely.
I mean?
I mean, that's a great amount of readership, especially to have here in this side of comics. Some people might scoff at that on the other end of it, but I mean, like you said, that's a very powerful readership if you can cultivate that. I do want to talk about process, but before we do that, JB, do you have any last questions about education or anything like that you want to get out of the way before we move on to process?
Yeah, I'm just I did, but we can move on. Yeah.
Did you want me to bitch more?
Well, I think that your criticisms, I don't know what your criticisms are of academia, but I can assume what those might be. Besides, the high price point, especially for private colleges, the sort of culture that exists within academia. You don't have to like make it where you're just venting. It can be like just a very dry, critical breakdown of the things that that didn't sit well with you in terms of like.
I mean, I think it's going around. I think the criticisms that I have are echoed by a lot of people, where it's just become very admin heavy. And I think a lot of the decisions being made. I think that the instructors, particularly if you are in the adjunct game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people said this to me when I started off, where it was like, academia, it's really cutthroat and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm coming from a band, you guys. Everybody, you might all be being a little bit dramatic,
Yeah.
But it is, there's a lot of strange stuff that goes on there. And, again, just, it does seem like the administrative end of it, the division between that and the actual people teaching.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty wide gap, you know, and it's and the way it plays out, I think is often really unfortunate, you know, and for the same reasons that we were talking about, where it's a system that sort of really wants you to stay in the system. You know, like the longer you keep pursuing degrees, the more money they get.
I mean, that would bring to my point of like, I've always had this attitude specifically with private art colleges, you know, a little bit to a certain degree with state schools, but for the most part, this applies to mostly private colleges, private institutions, is that the admin effectively just views their student body as ATMs.
And yes. As time went on, that became really depressing to me, where it was kind of like, this is just a business, you know, which is one thing, you know, but it's a business that sort of couches its business in doing
art
stuff
speak.
Even not in art speak, in sort of education speak. Like, we can do this because we're educators,
pedagogy,
and because you know we're providing this service and everything. And it's kind of like, no, you're just a business like everything else, and you are making a lot of decisions based solely on money, and you are also treating a lot of the people that work for you not. I mean, you know, like McDonald's employees, you know what I mean? Adjuncts are kind of like,
you're replaceable.
You're totally replaceable, and it's never a spoken thing, but it's sort of like, well, here's this class. If you don't want it, there's 8 people behind you.
Right.
Rather than like, you know, for me, it's like, I've been here for fucking 14 years. And, you know, and it's like, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, I was there for 14 years. My chair, you know, I'd get these like interschool emails that were like, let's say goodbye to this accountant who's been here for 6 months and blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? And like, you know, it was like an all school email, and I had been there for 14 years, and it's like, I left and there was, and I can like, my chair was wonderful. A lot of the people I taught with were wonderful, but anybody above the chair admin wise, you know, they would not know my name. And that's sad. And it's also like, if you're saying you're all about the students, then you should be valuing.
Yeah. Show it.
Yeah. Show it. And, you know,
we don't need a monologue. Just show it.
Yeah. And, fuck, let's talk about something else.
There you go. All right.
Well, I do want to go ahead and get into some process stuff, and I'm sure this has changed for you over the years. And that said, you know, I know you took a step away, so it may have changed. But, you know, speaking, you know, generally, and then also if you want to get in specifics as well, have you always made time for comics when you were attempting to be an active cartoonist? And if so, what does that look like? Is that like just kind of sneaking it in where you can fit it? Is it making sure to take, you know, a certain amount of time per day? Essentially, how does the bacon get made? I
think, again, going back to that conversation with Noah, you know, I think it's always the bacon has got made like when I can make the bacon, you know?
For sure, yeah.
like how can I fit in making the bacon, you know? And it's one of those things, you guys know, it's like a chicken egg thing that's really confusing the metaphor. But like, if you have to work a bunch, if you're not getting paid very well to do this thing, then you have to find ways to fit it in between things that are paying work, you know? And that can be, and, you know, as your life changes, like, I got married and then I had kids, and that stuff shifts everything considerably, you know, like you all of a sudden have even less time to carve out to do that thing. So you just fit it in wherever you can. And just to finish that sentence about talking with Noah, I mean, I also realized that I like doing other things as much as I like doing comics. And I think that kind of took me a long time to admit, you know?
Like you felt that you had to be like fully in?
Yeah.
And is that,
I was like, I do a bunch of different stuff, but primarily I view myself as a cartoonist, which I think I love making comics, but I don't think I'm really hardwired to just do that, to just make comics. Writing a song is pretty great. And and I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's easier than making a comic, but it's just a completely different, thing that you can get an equal charge out of.
Of course,
it is something that potentially can be done very quickly. Like,
yeah,
if you're in a certain state, it's like you can sit down and this part comes and then you're like, how about that? Like you can potentially be done writing a song in 10 minutes. That's never happened with me, but it's pretty arduous. But, with a comic, it's sort of like you have this idea and it's going to take quite a while before that, the full circle gets closed.
Right.
Not only in between you making it, having the thing and then executing it on paper. And then, for me, it's like the end. I don't, I think other people getting your art is when it's actually done. I don't think it's done when you're finished with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's done when it actually goes out and communicates with other people. That's like the electrical circuit that gets closed. And I don't think it gets closed until other people experience that thing. And so with comics, it can take a very, very long time for that entire process to work itself out, I mean,
sure.
Less so now.
I mean, I find that so interesting though, right? Like, because with music, the end game in most cases is that you go out and you perform, right? You tour, you get it in front of people, and the gratification is far more immediate.
Yes.
Than, say, making a comic, getting it published, printed, getting it distributed, going to shows, selling it at a table, hoping people buy it, and you just don't know.
Yeah, and then even after that, and that's another thing with comics is that you have to get yourself used to is like you could make the best comic in the world. That in no way means that you're ever going to hear that from people.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the final thing is like, how do you in the end know that you communicated the thing that you want to communicate or that people got what you were trying to put out there? It's
right
that you either have to talk to them or they write you a letter or something. And those are huge crapshoots, whether somebody's going to walk up to you at a show and be like, I loved your comic. And that, that might be it actually, and you can't stop them and be like, well, did you get that joke on page 5? And they'll be like, what? And then they're just going to run away from you, which is fine. But yeah, it's just a totally different thing.
So I guess this is like, how you feel. This next question, I guess you could answer it how you feel personally, but also just, generally as well, bringing up the interesting point that, the final cycle of art is being consumed. Do you believe in or not even necessarily do you believe, but do you make art for yourself or do you feel there is a purpose for that? Or do you approach every single project with this is going to get released?
I think, did I send you guys Full Wrath, the prose thing?
I didn't get that one. No, I got the, everything that I was looking over today was illustrated. Then I got the CD as well. So
yeah, I don't think I got that.
It's okay.
Oh though. Man. That's a full prose book. And that actually came out as a series of zines. That was it's like an autobio of me trying to remember, like when I was right before Low, I forged a bus pass and rode it around the country for a while. And I ended up in Oakland and it was just like, young chaos type stuff. And I just started writing about that strictly for myself. And then about 60 pages in, I was like, maybe I'll turn this into a zine because it sort of turns out this isn't. I thought I was just writing this for myself, but because I'm writing it for myself and not thinking about other people or how it might be taken, it's, I think it's coming out well because of that. Do you know what I mean?
No, definitely. Yeah. Your process was making it, I guess, make it and you see it that way. I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe this harkens back to sort of me talking about why I quit and why I'm starting again, and even why anybody would make art right now. I mean, those were there's a bunch of personal stuff, but there's also just, I think I was making art and there was I didn't know why I was making it, and it certainly wasn't bringing me any joy or even any sort of like deep satisfaction. I was doing it just because just because I was doing it and that's what I am and what I do. And I don't think that like joy is a necessary component for art. But I think I think what you do is making you miserable. When you give that to other people, it's going to make them miserable too. And I don't think there's a lot of room for that shit right now. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of misery all over the place, and I don't want to add to that pile of misery.
Yeah, that is totally fair, I think.
Yeah.
Well, with process, I know a lot of people approach comic making differently. A lot of folks have their own personal sort of guidelines, philosophies, whatever. A lot of people tend to believe that the drawing should inform the writing, whereas a lot of other people view it the other way around. So how do you usually approach a comic?
Well, the Sammy the Mouse stuff was kind of, I was reading a lot of Dr. Seuss because I had a young kid, and there was just this kind of energy to it. I don't know. I wanted to do a comic that was like, that process for me was interesting because I was like, in my earlier days, I would have sort of an idea of what I wanted a comic to be about, or I would have a drawing and I would base off that, or something I had written that I would build a story off of that. And it just came, every single one of them came differently. But with the Sammy the Mouse stuff, I really purposely wanted to write it or to make it in comics form. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to work it all out on the page as I was drawing it,
Yeah.
I would do thumbnails every once in a while, but I wanted to like really dig into like, this is written not in the component parts of the language of comics, but within the language of comics itself. I want this to happen on the page. And obviously I have some overarching ideas of like where this is going to go and how it's going to work. But I also wanted to leave room for, the other thing about comics is like you can get in, some people like this, but you can get into that bricklayer mode, where you've got the whole thing scripted, then you pencil the whole thing, then you ink the whole thing. And after a while, it's just like there aren't a lot of surprises, you're just kind of executing.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes that can be great, but I wanted there to be surprises and stuff. I wanted to keep myself really interested in the page and the story as it was occurring in real time, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, like I can appreciate the approach of being extremely methodical about the process.
Yeah.
And just like planning and mapping everything out, knowing exactly how everything's going to be executed. Whereas, personally speaking, I prefer to have that sort of question mark while I'm working. Yeah,
me too. And I think of someone like Charles Burns, who I think he's definitely, I don't know Charles well, but I know him some. And I think it's very much like very methodical. Everything's planned out. He just like executes perfectly, and I think there's a lot to be, again, it just comes down to like different personalities and different work, just how you work and what you're into. And me saying all that stuff about Sammy the Mouse, it wasn't like I sat down and planned that. It was just sort of like, how do I get this story across? And that was the way that it made sense. But maybe that was a good thing because, like I said, it's been 10 years since the last issue, and the reason I put it down for 10 years is like, a bunch of life stuff happened. My marriage ended, all this stuff. And I had to kind of reassess, like, man, I don't even know is this comic about the same thing? Like, I don't even know if this is about what it was when I started this comic. You know what I mean? Like, I've changed a lot. Things have changed a lot. Like, and I think having the malleability to even dig into something and be like, okay, all of those things on the table, do you still know why you're doing this and what this thing is about? And I think for a number of years I didn't. And then I was like, yeah, actually I do. So I'm going to put out another issue.
So the conscious decision to wait until you kind of knew exactly what you were going to do with this new issue of Sammy the Mouse. You didn't put anything out in between book 2 and 3?
Yeah,
like
no,
as far as comics wise?
No, I mean that recidivist you guys got, the one with the spirals on that. Like I self-released that on Mano, and that. Did you guys ever run across the original version of that?
No, I've never actually seen it. I have run across the original, Sammy book over at Fantagraphics, but
okay, yeah, the original Recidivist 4, I did that. I had an offset press, and I had a risograph, so I did that. That was a zine that I did on. It was 9 colors on the Riso, and then the whole thing went through a pass on my. I did all the text in metallic silver on my offset press, and I hand collated and folded them and all that, and I did 800 of those. But I mean, it was a very purposeful, like, I want to make an incredibly fucked up object, that handmade object that, like, you can't. Yeah, that just absolutely feels like somebody touched and made every single part of this. And I did, 800 of those. And then when they were all gone, I was like, well, I'm not making any of those again. So Leon at Secret Acres was down to reprint it. So that's sort of the thing you guys have is kind of the professionally printed one, whereas the one I did was full on zine. Yeah, I was really digging into the, like, what does it mean to have a handmade zine, and what can you do with that, and how absurd can you go with that idea and still have it work. So I did that in between, and then the prose thing, I wrote Full Wrath, and and I put out a hand record, and I mean, that's what I mean. There's always been not just comics, where I'm working in other. I jump around a lot, where it's like,
right.
And I like doing that,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it keeps you engaged as an artist, and it's pretty cool that you're able to draw upon different fan bases and so forth as well. Because you are, we're probably not going to devote as much time into music here since we're more comic centric, but I mean, there are soundtracks to these books that we're talking about, that you've also included with the packaging. So, and I think that as artists, we tend to get bored, especially when we force ourselves to, I don't want to say force ourselves, but when we're, working on a project that might be taking a certain length of time, that burnout can be very real. So I feel like jumping around and having the ability to stay engaged with different avenues of still creating, there's definitely worth to that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I know a lot of folks who are really like, this is my, where they do hone in on that one. Alan from Lowe has always been that way. It's sort of like, this is my outlet. This is where all this stuff goes, and I'm a lot more kind of just follow my nose. I mean, I did that issue of Recidivist because, the Sammy the Mouse was sort of driving me a little bonkers. So I did the Recidivist, and then after that, I was actually working on this, I was pitching a 250-page, 300-page comic book biography of Philip K. Dick that I was working on for quite a while. And that shit the bed in a way where I was like, yeah, I mean, I was a good ways into that thing. And I was really, really, really digging into it hard. And when that shit the bed, I think that was actually when I had to take a serious break from comics.
You're obviously here doing, promo and press for the new book, which was put out on Killgore. What was the decision to go with Killgore as opposed to self-releasing, through Mano?
Well, it's a co-release. It's a co-release of Mano and Killgore.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, honestly, it's because I love Dan.
Yeah.
And I was like, if we did this together, you're better at promotion than I am. I was like, this would just give us an opportunity to talk on the phone and hang out more. You want to do this? And he was like, yeah.
And yeah, sometimes it's that easy, just your buddies and just, hey, let's do this. Which is honestly the best kind of relationship you can have when it's that simple. You don't have to overcomplicate it and bring a bunch of bullshit into the relationship.
That's when things get weird with comics and with everything else, where it's like, there's not enough. Like, if we were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars or even thousands of dollars, just the reason to do these things is to get them out there, and make your money and make your money back. And if you can, and get it into people's hands. And there's no sort of grand scheme of taking over the world,
Right. Unless you're just delusional about it.
Yeah. Which
I have met people in small press that believe that it's possible, and hey, good riddance and good luck.
I mean, if they can swing it, that's great. I just, the business
history doesn't lie.
Yeah. And the business end of this, I think you dig too far into the business end of this and that'll wipe you out a little bit. And just the older I get, the more I realize that if you really want to hang out with the people you love and your friends, then you kind of have to invent projects that'll force you to hang out.
I mean, that's basically this pod.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're
it totally fucking works, because if you don't have that, like, let's do this thing, then it's always like, we were going to get coffee, but I had this thing, or like, you know what I mean? You have to.
There's stakes involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if it's not like, life altering, there's still stakes. You know, like at the end of the day, it's just comics, but hey, there's a purpose here.
Yeah. And also it's like, we have this thing to do. Let's do this thing together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those things are great. So yeah, and Dan's just one of the best dudes there is. And it's totally worked because we've been able to, now we talk on the phone more than we did before.
Hell yeah. Well, before we get out of here, and we'll let you plug everything at the end, we did get a couple questions for you.
Oh, really?
From our avid fan base. So one was not a question, but rather a statement from Neil.art. I had a 370-word question, but Instagram didn't allow me to DM it to you. If this happens in the future, you can just not use a little question box and DM it. But yeah, no. So first, real question, though. This one, and I can tell you who it was off air, but for on air purposes.
Is this going to be horrible?
No, it's not horrible, but this was submitted and was asked to be asked anonymously. So here's the exact reading of the question. Can I ask Zach a question anonymously? Please do not give me credit for this question.
Yeah.
How was working with Fantagraphics? Were there any conversations or expectations about if they'd keep your books in print?
Well, I love Fantagraphics.
Sure.
This is a way longer pause than I meant it to be.
We can fix all this in post. Don't worry.
I kind of want to keep that in because that's funny as hell.
I think it's like Fantagraphics was deeply, deeply formative for everything, for the way I view comics and what they are and what they can be. When I was a young teen and everything was superheroes, it's sort of impossible for me to describe how much they changed, like what a voice in the wilderness they were about that comics were art. I think it's something that's really taken for granted now. But when they were doing the Comics Journal and when they started Fantagraphics, that was not the case at all. And they were dogged proponents of that reality, And they put out a bunch of my favorite comics of all time. And I love them. And they're fucking weirdos.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to be putting this stuff out and, taking the risks they have been over time, so...
And I think they are a business. I hope this sounds correct. I mean, they are a business, but I think they ended up being a business secondary to the fact that they wanted to put out comics.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it was definitely like them just wanting to put out what they thought, should be the kind of comics that should be published on the racks. And I don't think that they were in it to make money. I mean, I read that big, gigantic book and I never got that vibe. But I mean, to be honest, calling a spade, Fantagraphics has been on life support at multiple times through, the life of that business. And I feel like they always end up surviving because the passion that they have ends up, keeping them afloat. People don't want to see them go away. They're always going to be around as long as... Well, I don't want to say they're always going to be around, but history has shown that they've always been able to, weather the storm And I think it's because they're putting out what they want this whole time.
Yeah, and I think they, in the answer to the anonymous question, I mean, I think, put it this way, I know a number of my Fantagraphics books, or actually there hasn't been that many, but I know they put it out, like when Kim Thompson was alive, I was like, can we do this thing with this book? And he was like, yeah, this book isn't going to sell shit, but I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of how Kim was. And he's like, well, can't you just tell me that it's going to sell a lot? Just like lie to me or something, But I mean, I think they have put out a great number of books just because they love them and that they knew they were going to lose money on them,
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think they've also put out books that they thought they were going to make money on and they didn't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they're doing that right now as we speak.
And I've been sort of out of the game, so I don't. I'm really not as aware as I used to be. But
yeah.
And I'm not reading as many comics as I used to. So
you're not missing much. Nah, just joking.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Last question is from Instagram user D Moses. They ask, "Did you make comics on tour with Lowe? What did that look like?"
Yeah, first 2 issues of Recidivist that got collected in the Like a Dog book from Fantagraphics. Those I kind of squeezed in between, but it was, I would try to bring stuff on tour and work on it on tour, and that was tough. So I would just, when we had downtime or we weren't on tour, I would try and bang it out then.
Were you all a bus or a van band?
Oh, we were a van.
So it was probably hard as fuck to draw in the van, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it just wasn't really a thing that could happen, Yeah, I guess it's always just been, when can I find time to work on this? Like I have a chunk here, and with anything, it's kind of you start off and then you gain speed, and as it gets closer to the end, you carve out more time. All these folks who do it every day, a lot of it is inertia. Like you get in a mode where you're doing this every day. And then you try and stay there. And I could certainly do that for stretches, but then something, then that stretch would end and I'd have to do something else for a while and then, find another block of time and try and build up that inertia again. That's always kind of been the deal,
For sure. So was it easier for you to, I guess, kind of get you to elaborate on that? Was it easier for you to work on comics like off tour?
Yeah, I'd say... Yeah, the answer to that question was I was barely ever able to work on comics on tour at all. But there you go. Like I kept a crazy journal of all those years, where I would, I couldn't pull out a page of comics and work on it in the van, but I could go for a walk after sound check, get a cup of coffee and write in my journal for a couple hours, and
sure.
And again, I sort of view all that stuff as the same thing, it's I view it as the same thing, but some stuff you do is maybe intended for public consumption and some of it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And actually sometimes you even get that wrong, like I did this for public consumption. I probably should have kept it to myself or vice versa. I think figuring out that you asking yourself what your intent is and answering it honestly is always should be a big part of how you approach anything.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, Zach, I guess before we get out of here today, I know you're going to be at Cake here next week. We'll see you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's coming up next? I know you just got done with TCAF. Where can people find you online, check you out, buy your books, see you on the road, etc.?
I got Big Cartel, Mano 21, Big Cartel. I think most of the stuff I have available is on there, so you can pick stuff up there. We're doing Cake. I might be doing SPX. Yeah. And yeah, I'm doing all that. I'm trying to actually open a print shop right now. So yeah, t-shirts and posters and stuff. So
yeah, any social media for that or your personal social media where people can stay up to date on that?
Just Zak Sally on Instagram. That's the only social media I do. But yeah, I'm kind of working on that right now.
Hell yeah. Well, best of luck, going forth with that. And, we'll definitely see you on the road. And yeah, the new book looks, feels, and reads great. So make sure to pick it up if you see Zach on the road.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, man. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, that'll do it for this episode. Once again, thanks for Zach for coming on and really being able to talk to us about his work and his experiences. And until next time, stay gutter.